Right, so we've gone past the 7 o'clock mark, so we'll make a start. So my privilege to welcome everybody to the first Mickleover Running Club Q&A with our first guest, Beth. How do you pronounce your name, Beth? Sorry, I don't want to get it wrong. Pascal or Pascal or?
Either is fine. I actually change between the two, so I'm not really sure myself. Whatever comes out.
That's Beth Pascall. I'll just call you Beth to make it easier.
Well, that's fine.
Okay. So this interview is the first in our series of Inspiring Women series of interviews. So firstly, I just want to thank you for joining us and giving us a bit of your time. We appreciate you doing this for us. I'm sure you're busy.
A pleasure to be invited. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Just to start off with then, firstly, for those in the group that aren't fully aware of you and what you do or your career, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into ultra running?
Yeah, so I'm fairly local to you guys, so I'm living near Belfort at the moment, but I'm originally from Somerset, and I've been running really all my life, but started getting into running ultras and trail running probably in the last 7 or 8 years. And I think I was initially, I read a few books, but books like Born to Run and Ultra Marathon Man and Feet in the Clouds, kind of classic books. And yeah, I started running off-road just as to challenge myself really, and had no intention of becoming good at it. But I think that because I'd been fairly active all my life, when I started, I immediately was okay at it, and yeah, I guess my career has kind of taken off over the last few years, and I'm now running at a professional level with Salomon. Yeah, and I've had some success at some of the big races all over the world. And yeah, I've competed for Great Britain on a few occasions. I see my forte is really around the 100-mile distance. So mountain 100 milers is really my thing, but I do dabble in all sorts of distances, and I still do the odd road race and short race when I can. And yeah, so trail running, a bit of fell running as well. I wouldn't really call myself a fell runner, but I've been told off for that recently because after I set the record on the Bob Graham round last year. Yeah. I'm not allowed to say I'm not a fell runner anymore, but I still wouldn't really call myself a fell runner. Mainly stick to the trail. Yeah, and that's basically a summary of what I'm doing right now. I should add, I'm also a pediatrician as well. So the running is not full time. Although I've managed to rearrange my life a bit, so I've got a bit more time on my hands for running and spending a bit less time at work at the moment. So fingers crossed that'll be useful for the rest of the year, and I'll be able to do some races.
Brilliant. That fits in with one of the questions that somebody in the group asked actually. So I may as well. I'm going out of order with my questions, but I'll may as well throw it in now while it's on your mind. If I can find it. Yeah, so someone asked in the group, apologies to who it was, I haven't got their name next to it, but you mentioned your Bob Graham rounds. Now you managed to do that in 14 hours, 34 minutes, which was 50. Is that 50 minutes off the record, was it?
Yeah.
So that's a massive accomplishment, isn't it? And you don't call yourself a fell runner. I think some fell runners would probably be offended by that, the fact that you don't call yourself a fell runner. But how would you compare that achievement to some of the success that you've had in other races? How does that compare? Because it's not a race, is it? But as far as an achievement, how would you compare that to some of the big races that you've done?
Pretty highly, actually. I mean, I've always, until the pandemic, I've always stuck to races. Well, mainly stuck to races, and I've always kind of put other challenges like that on the back burner, because I valued races more, and I thought that results in races were kind of meant more or more meaningful. But being forced into doing something different last year, I do feel like the Bob Graham was certainly up there with like my top achievements. And I wonder whether it meant so much because of everything else that had gone wrong last year. And yeah, when I set the record, it did feel amazing. And I think in part it was because of so much disappointment and everything. And maybe if, I'd done the Bob Graham in any normal year when it had been sandwiched in between lots of other races, it perhaps wouldn't have meant so much. But yeah, it certainly certainly I will be racing as soon as there are races to do, but it's made me think about, in the future, I might prioritize certain kind of challenges or FKTs or records, give as much time and weight to them as races. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because we've got into a routine, haven't we, as ultra runners, of just planning your year out and just going, I'm going to do this race, and this race, and everything under normal circumstances that it always comes about. It's only things like injuries that stop you from doing the things that you want to do in a year. But everyone's had to kind of refocus, haven't they, with their running, and think about. It made me think about what running actually meant to me because I got to the point where I was thinking that races almost became the be all and end all, that I've got to have this race planned in, I've got to do this race, I've got to set this time. But then when they were taken away, you have to sort of reprioritize how running fits into your life and start to make other goals. So was that the goal that kept you going through the first lockdown then?
Yeah, it was totally. For me, when it was clear that there'd be no races, I decided pretty quickly I'd do it Bob Graham, and that was a big focus. I think it's been actually harder this time round, the last lockdown, because we've I think it's harder, partly because maybe it's tiring going through this whole process again, and we're in the same situation really with the uncertainty, and we actually haven't been able to have goals. Really, it's been really hard to have goals over the last few months, hasn't it? And yeah, for me, I found this time round a bit harder actually, and I've had to really, as you say, like reevaluate what I want from running, and get satisfaction from the smaller things, like even like small bits of progression in training that now I feel like a big sense of accomplishment from like getting a bit quicker, or a session going a little bit better than it did before. And you have to kind of think about the small things and make sure you're enjoying training and progressing, and that kind of has to be enough at the moment.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Just moving into the questions that I've got down from the group. Obviously today is appropriately International Women's Day, and this is part of what we wanted to do, was highlight female runners and ultra runners as to kind of encourage ones in the group that have perhaps not tried ultra running before. But the question I've got for you is, as a female runner, do you feel that the sport of ultra running is inclusive of the female athletes? You say that's true?
I would say it is true. It's there is certainly still work that needs to be done, but I think in the last decade, like we've done quite well at becoming more inclusive and trying to promote women in trail running and ultra running more. I mean, women are underrepresented in so many sports, so many outdoor sports. I think it's worse in sports like cycling and triathlon. And I think things are starting to change. And I think we're making good progress. And certainly, I would love to see a day when we had equal numbers of men and women on start lines. That might not happen, but certainly, the numbers are improving. Participation in women is improving. And And yeah, I don't know exactly why that is, but it's probably all the small things that we're doing, and celebrating women's success a lot more. You know, if you see these days, if you see, for example, there's always great discussion about prize money in these races and unequal prize money. And if a race gives out unequal prize money between men and women, they do get shamed pretty badly these days. I think that's becoming less and less common, which is good.
Yeah. Can't get away with it anymore, can they?
You can't.
Just along those lines, have you seen a trend? Because there's something I've noticed with the races getting increasingly longer, like these 200-mile plus races. It seems like women seem to do really well at the really, really long ultras. Is that something that you would ever be interested in doing? You know, like something like the Moab 240, something like that, a real, or even the, you know, a spine, that kind of distance.
Yeah, I think you're right in that certainly the longer the race, the gap between men and women gets smaller and smaller. I have done some of these long races. I did the spine race, one of my first races actually, and I did do a thing where I ran the Cape Wrath Trail a couple of winters ago with a friend, which was about, I'll get it completely wrong, 200 miles, 250 miles or something. So I have dabbled in that distance. I think it does really suit me. The problem is it's just so damaging that if you know, it kind of writes you off for the rest of the season. Really, it takes so long to recover.
Yeah, it's quite a big effort into that.
Yeah, certainly I do enjoy that, like multi-day kind of non-stop kind of thing. But yeah, you just have to choose your races carefully, and it would have been a great thing to do last year, to be honest, when there was nothing else going on. But now you're always trying to cram as many races as possible into a season,
into a short period of time. That's true. Just sticking along the lines of female specific questions, Vicky had a couple of questions out of the group. She firstly wanted to ask about hormone cycles. She says that it means that sometimes you can feel really sluggish and lacking in energy. As an athlete running at a high level, do you have any tips on how to get out and still do those long training runs, or put in a strong performance on race day if this coincides with the wrong time of the month? Can she make any recommendations? So that's a big question for you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't feel like I can answer that particularly well. So yeah, certainly, I mean, for all the men here who don't know about this type of thing, like the time of the month makes a big difference in how training and your performance really. So and your ability to store and utilize your glycogen stores. So yeah, at certain times of the month you will feel sluggish and you won't be able to, you'll be running, if you're, you know, doing a session, you won't be able to hit the right times in your session, and everything will just feel harder. Whereas at certain other times of the month you will feel like you can just nail every session and you're running really, really well, and it feels amazing. And it affects all women differently. For me personally, I honestly don't like notice big differences at different times of the month, so I'm super lucky. So I would say, I think that if you are somebody who does really feel this, I think you can structure your training around your periods and things. So perhaps you don't plan to do that long run at certain times of the month, and you know that there's that week or so when you're always feeling really good, you try and pack your sessions in then. And I know coaches that do work with athletes in that way and really kind of periodize their training around their cycle. I think when it comes to racing, it's a bit difficult. And yeah, I don't really have any advice. I guess if you're someone who has a really regular cycle, then you know exactly when you're going to be on your period, and when the races are, you can try and avoid races at that time. But yeah, it's not straightforward, and I should probably learn more about it, to be honest. But yeah, that's the only advice I have, really.
It's something I'm interested in because I do a bit of coaching as well, you see. It's a question I've been asked before, and I've researched it, and I don't want it to be like kind of a no-go area where people feel uncomfortable, talking about it. It should be something that female athletes and male coaches should be able to talk about, I think. So I appreciate you sharing how you feel about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think male coaches should be checking in, making sure women have regular cycles and that type of thing. And it's something that I talk to my coach about as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. I appreciate you answering a bit of a curveball question there.
Okay.
Just going back to your work, I was supposed to ask this question earlier, and I asked the wrong question. But obviously, you've got quite a tiring job as well at times. You sometimes have to work long night shifts. How do you? This is a question from Kelly and Hannah out of the group. They want to know how you balance training with working long hours, sometimes doing 12-hour night shifts. How do you manage to fit your mileage? And I know the kind of mileage you do because I follow you on Strava as well. So I know what your weeks entail. So how do you manage to balance those two things in your life?
So firstly, I would say that work stress and being like at work for long hours on my feet is the same. You treat that type of stress in the same way as you do physical stress from training, because it all adds up. So certainly at times when I'm working long hours, I'll really back off training. And then there's no point doing any hard training like in between really long shifts, because you're not going to get any benefit from it. Because the recovery isn't going to be the same. You're not going to recover. So there's no point doing a night shift and then coming home and doing some sort of hard interval session and then having 4 hours sleep and then going back to work, because it's just not worth it. So I would tend to just do easy running around times of like when I've got a lot of hours, and then when I've got a bit more time, I get all my hard sessions in then. So my training is completely built around my work, I suppose. So for example, on Strava, I mean, an outsider might look and say, oh, why has she done that session then, and then like why she got 4 easy days and then like 2 really hard days, and that doesn't make sense. But it's because it's all kind of built around work, I guess.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Do you stick? So you have like a fluid plan that if you know that you're going to be working harder or working long shifts, then you adjust your training. So apologies, I don't know whether you are you coached or are you self-coached?
Yeah, I'm coached. Yeah.
Yes. So does your coach adjust things on the fly, kind of thing, very like at short notice, or are you given some kind of buffer to be able to do that yourself?
Yeah, I mean both really. So the training is constantly changing based on the feedback. So for example, I have my training plan, and I used to like print it out, and one like page of A4 would be 3 weeks, and I quickly realized that there was no point in doing that, because it changes. It's constantly changing. Like every 2 or 3 days I'd have to print it out again, because it's constantly changing. But sometimes around busy shifts, like I'll have an option about whether to have a day off or to, for example, when I'm working night shifts, I tend to sleep as long as I can in the day, and then if I wake up and I have slept all the way through and I've got no time to run, then great, that's awesome. It means I've slept well, I don't run. But if I wake up and I've got 2 hours, then I'll go for a 2-hour easy run. So keep it fairly flexible around that time.
That's good. As far as your training then, with you sticking local, well, we're all staying local, aren't we, as local as we can do. What's your favourite place to run? What's been your favourite place to run? That since we've had to stay a bit more local rather than going off to exotic locations to train, have you have you managed to find some local routes that you absolutely love and didn't realise that were there since lockdown?
Yes, I mean, I can't really say that I love anywhere anymore, because all the local routes I feel like I've done to death. I'm sure we all feel the same. But I spend like most of my training is around Shining Cliff Woods and Crouch Chase, that kind of area just north of Belper, because that's just where I get to from my front door. So I've done an awful lot of miles going up and down through every single trail in the woods, like million times. Yeah, so around there, I guess, it's kind of my go-to training venue. I have been doing some of my faster training on the canal, the Cromford Canal, and I go up to High Peak Trail a lot and do my kind of long, moderate pace, kind of faster runs up there, and any interval work I do up there, which is nice. Very cold most of the time and windy, but yeah, I mean, really lucky really to have all of that kind of in my backyard. But yeah, desperate to travel a bit more. Yeah.
I know Shining Cliff Woods is nice. There's lots of little tiny little routes all the way through that, and then you can pick a different route every time. I'd never been there until this last year. Someone showed me a route through there, and it's you feel like you could be anywhere when you're in the middle of those woods. They're steep enough, and there's lots of tree cover. You can feel like lots of rocks everywhere. You could be anywhere.
Yeah.
And when you're there, yeah, it's a nice route.
Yeah.
Where's your favourite place to run under normal circumstances? Where would you pick to go and train if you could go? If time and money was no option, where would be the place that you would go and do a training block?
What, in this country or abroad?
Or anywhere.
Oh well, I'd pick somewhere I hadn't been before, but yeah, I've been lucky to spend quite a lot of time running in the Alps, and yeah, love it out there. But in this country, yeah, the lakes, there's so much there. You know, I know some parts of the lakes really, really well, but I'm always like going to new places, and there's just so much more to discover up there. So yeah, I'm like, after the 12th of April, I'll be there most weekends, I guess. Yeah, staying in the van. Yeah, I'm excited.
It'd be great when races start again.
Mm.
So speaking of races, then, what's been your probably your favourite, what's your best race experience you've had? Memorable.
Probably the Western States 100, which is I think it's the oldest 100-mile race in the world, actually. It's out in California, and it's famous because it gets very, very hot. So you start at a quite high altitude, and you do go up and down some mountains, but it's mainly downhill, and then towards the end you go through all these canyons, and it gets up to about 50 degrees Celsius. But it's also probably, well, one of the most competitive 100-mile races in the world. And yeah, it's a really big deal in America, but still the field is very, very small, which is, I think, why I like it so much. Sometimes these big ultra races like UTMB are a bit overwhelming, but Western States, because it's so tiny, there's only, I think, 360 odd entrants, I think, which is so for a lot of people who enter through the ballot, it can take 10 years, 15 years to get a place. But if you're lucky enough to get a spot through the few other routes there are, yeah, it's just like a really awesome, intimate race experience. It's really, really cool. It's
probably the most, I would say, it's probably the most iconic ultra in North America, anyway, as far as popularity and it being viewed as like the best of the best go there. So yeah, it must have been a real achievement to get there. And what avenue did you take to get in there? Because I know obviously Joe Public has to wait years through the ballot system. but you can get in through other races, can't you? How did you get into that race?
Yeah, so you can get in. You have to win golden tickets at other races. They're all in the US, so it's a little bit harder for us to go out and get a ticket that way. I got a place through the Ultra Trail World Tour, which is a series of races, and you get an overall ranking at the end of the year. And I think I was ranked sort of 4th in the world or something, which then got me a place at Western States.
Wow.
That's a simplified version of how it works, but
yeah. I'm sure it's more complicated than that. Is it as complicated as trying to get a place at UTMB?
More complicated.
More complicated.
I would say. Well, more. It's it's a bit more political, I would say.
Yeah.
But in general, harder to get a place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know it's like a bucket list race for many people, isn't it? And you hear about people like being on the waiting list. But I think every year you don't get in, you get an extra ticket into the ballot, something like that. So your chances do increase apparently as the years go on. So for anyone who wants to do that race, be prepared to wait to do it. Unless you can go and win a golden ticket race, that's an easier way in. Okay, so more questions then from the group. Okay, injuries. One of my favourite subjects, since I'm injured at the minute and I'm in my 3rd week of not running. So this is pertinent to all of us. But this is something that I talk about with my coaching clients. The fact that we're almost, as ultra runners, we seem to be in like a bit of a never-ending cycle of injuries. Well, I do anyway. I know that we're either injured, recovering from injury, or we're blissfully unaware that the niggle that we keep ignoring is going to turn into an injury. What's your take on your history of injuries? If you do have a big history of injuries, what's been the thing that's held you back with you running as far as injuries go?
I haven't had any significant injuries. I mean, I've had one injury. I mean, I've had a few kind of niggles that are things I wouldn't really call injury. I have one injury, but it doesn't. So last September I broke my ankle, but it was a traumatic injury, which in a way, I mean, it depends what you do, is better than an overuse injury. Yeah. So actually, I haven't really, and that was something that. Well, I'll talk about that. I broke my ankle and I carried on running for 4 weeks because I thought it was just a sprain, and then I got an MRI scan and found out it was broken. But actually, and obviously it was, well, in a way it was the best possible timing at the beginning of what was going to be a really crappy winter. But actually, during that, when I was injured, I couldn't run. So I had 4 weeks off running and I did a lot of cycling. I spent a lot of time on the bike. And when I started running again, I'd had nearly 8 weeks off in total. When I started running again, it very, very quickly, I was running faster than I had done pre-injury. And we don't really know whether it was the rest or I just got fitter from doing all the cycling. And I when people say, oh, you get injured and you come back stronger, I thought that was just a lie, what people said to make you feel better. But I've now realized that is true. And now I'm running a lot better than I've ever had before. And I put it down to that injury. But generally speaking, injuries, I do quite a lot of strength and conditioning, which certainly helps prevent injuries. I do various different things. I do about 3 sessions a week, and it's mainly kind of targeted to my weaknesses. Like my coach doesn't, not all his athletes will do the exact same thing. We all do different things because we all have different things we need to work on. And then I think it's about being like, do you have a coach? I know you're a coach yourself, but do you have a
No, and that's probably my downfall is not having somebody to call me on what I'm doing. And I know that with me, it's always been, it tends to be overuse injuries and not paying attention to niggles. So the one I'm dealing with at the minute is a TFL, overactive TFL muscle in my hip, which was caused by a weakness in my gluteus medius and basically a weak core. So it was putting more stress on that muscle, and it was a niggle for, and when I look back at it, it was a niggle for months, and I should have addressed it. And then it went from being a niggle to being a really sharp pain, and basically that's where I am now, that I'm waiting for that to heal and doing specific strength work to work on those weaknesses. But like you say, it's something you're aware of. How do you know, how are you aware of your weaknesses? Is this just something that you pick up from small niggles that begin and then you work on them, or are you actively looking for certain areas to strengthen up because you know it will help with running?
For me, for example, my hamstrings, I do a lot of work on my hamstrings, because when I do a hard session, it's always my hamstrings that kind of get sore afterwards. And I've had issues with sore hamstrings before, so I know that's something I need to work on. So yeah, I do a lot of my S&C is heavily weighted to working on my hamstrings. But yeah, I think it's really difficult, even if, you know, I feel like I know a lot about how to train, but without someone sort of overseeing what I'm doing, you can't be completely objective. So yeah, I think, yeah, like a lot of most injuries could be prevented by having a coach. Not all, but a lot of them can be, or just having someone who's keeping an eye on your training and what you're doing. Because usually when something goes wrong for me in training, whether it's like a niggle or I have a bad race, and I look back at my training, it's so obvious what I've done wrong. It's in retrospect, it's always obvious. But it really helps to have someone kind of keeping an eye on those things as well.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
and exactly. I mean, you can always look back and pinpoint something that went wrong. Yeah. Looking at we talked about races being affected by the pandemic. Do you feel like your training was affected adversely by the pandemic, or do you feel that there was some positives that you have taken from being forced into lockdown?
Certainly racing less has helped. Just having that consistency in training. So normally in you have multiple training cycles in a year. You've got a training block, and then you're tapering, and then you're racing, and then you're resting, and then you're training again. But just having that consistency is really good, and certainly helps with getting fitter and faster. So I wouldn't really, I think all the things that I thought I needed were like mountains and things, to prepare like well for races, actually are less important than I thought. Even going to the gym was something that I thought was really, really important, but actually adapting things and doing it at home is perfectly okay. So no, I wouldn't say it's been negatively affected, and yeah, certainly been positive things as well. And I've kind of realized that I can, get away with doing much more locally without having the need to kind of drive everywhere for training all the time.
Yeah, it's I suppose it's for us, our gym is just going out the front door, but you kind of I felt sorry for people, you know, the gym rats, that it was their life, that they would go to the gym every single morning or every single evening, and they've been forced. But we've all learned to adapt, haven't we? So perhaps do you have, what kind of equipment do you have at home for doing home workouts?
Very little. So I've got a few dumbbells, like just adjustable, you know, the ones that you can add other bits on. A Swiss ball, and a bench arriving tomorrow, actually. So far I've just been doing like step ups like on the garden wall and box jumps onto the garden wall and things, but yeah, as of tomorrow we'll have a bench as well, and that's it. Yeah, so not very much.
It's amazing what.
Yeah, I'll add to that a bike as well, which a turbo, which we got during lockdown 2 when I was injured.
Do you do like Zwift and Peloton? Do you do that as well? Do you find that helps with? Do you do like speed work on like intervals on there? Do you feel that's something that helps you?
I'm not anymore. So when I was injured, I was doing a lot. Sometimes I did 2 interval sessions a day on the bike, and I was doing a lot of intensity. Now, because I'm doing more running volume, I will just go on Zwift once or twice a week, but keep it easy. So do it on an easy day, and all my intensity is running.
Yeah.
But yeah, certainly, I think it's amazing. I think I really didn't realise how how amazing cycling is for getting fit and improving your running. So for someone who like struggles with injuries, or can't like do a certain amount of running volume because they're close to getting injuries, I think cycling is a great way of adding volume for sure.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. I know I've got a client who he struggles with injuries, and his is, so we're building his volume, but we're building it with cycling so that he does more. He's getting to his volume, but he's not putting the stress on his knee that's recovering from last summer. So I think it's. I know as a runner for myself, I've kind of viewed, when you're really into running and it's all you want to do is run. And then the thought of being forced to cycle it's difficult to kind of take on board. But when you haven't got a choice, and when you know that it's actually a bit of aerobic fitness that you can gain, then I think everyone appreciates being able to go out for a bike ride, especially in lockdown. It's I think it was amazing just to see the amount of people out on bikes, and I was always hoping that people would carry that on even after lockdown. It's just a nice thing to see the amount of people doing exercise, because that's all they had to do was get out and do that. Okay, let me think. Some more questions from the group. I'll look through my list. Okay, James has asked, have you got any running mantras or coping strategies for ultras? Anything you tell to yourself repeatedly to keep going?
No, I don't. Yeah, it's a question I get asked a lot, and honestly, I don't think I do. I think like when I'm in a really difficult situation in a race, if I'm having a really tough time, this is not something I purposely think about, but it always kind of comes back to me. I think about everyone who's helped me get into that situation. So my husband, who has spent all his annual leave the whole year and the last 5 years, coming to races and supporting me. And I think about my coach, who puts so much time and effort into getting me in a good position for the race, and all the people who kind of helped me, and that keeps me going, I guess. And also thinking that I've chosen to, like, reminding myself that I've chosen to do this. Like, I can't be angry, upset about some like situation that I've chosen to put myself in, but there are no specific mantras, I guess, but they're the things that kind of come back to me when I'm having a tough time in a race.
I read that. I read the bit you put about your Bob Graham, how you got to the top of the first climb and thought, what am I doing here? And thought that you'd set off too fast and that you wouldn't be able to hold the pace. But yeah, things worked out okay, it seems.
They did. But, I don't know. You often get that in races. Have I gone off too slow? Have I gone off too fast? You just kind of got to believe in yourself and hope for the best. And sometimes it goes right, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, as long as that initial rush of adrenaline doesn't keep going for the first few hours, as long as it's just that initial rush of the start of the race. I worry about when we go back to full racing, that everyone's just going to be so amped to be at a race that everyone's just going to set off at lightning pace, and be people all over the trail falling over because they can't quite contain their excitement.
I can't wait for that moment.
As far as people that have helped you along the way, then what about sponsors? Then can you do you want to like list your sponsors and how they support you in each way, if you don't mind doing that?
I mean, I don't think I feel. I mean, sponsors. It's purely a financial, economic thing for them, right? They don't invest. I mean, it's return on investment. Like, they don't invest. I'm not emotionally, like, they don't invest emotionally in my performances, right? they care if you win because it's good for them, but they don't like care about you as a person, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So saying that, I'm obviously very grateful for my sponsors. So my main sponsor is Salomon. So I mean, Salomon are the only I have they who I run for. The other, I work with a few other brands, but I'm just ambassadors for them. So I work with Spring Energy for nutrition. So they make some gels that are not your standard maltodextrin gels. They're kind of rice and fruit, really tasty, but real ingredients, which are awesome. I work with Lecky for poles, Jolbo for sunglasses. I use Compex as well, which is the muscle electrical stimulation machines that help with recovery and strength and things. Who else do I Suunto. Yeah, but a few other brands, and they're, you know, I have chosen those brands because they are the products I want to use, and I really believe in all of them. And the same with Salomon. Like, I wanted to run for Salomon because they are the shoes I want to wear. Yeah, that suits me best. So yeah, I really believe in all the brands that I kind of represent. Yeah, sure.
So it's a bit of a fallacy, isn't it, that when people are getting into ultra running and they see all these famous runners and they're all sponsored, they think that it's some kind of rock and roll lifestyle, and that it's all everyone's being paid a big wage to promote certain brands. And I suppose that there may be some at the, you know, at the very top level who are being paid to do stuff like that. But how have you got any views on, although you're tied to certain products, is there anything that you would recommend for runners? And it doesn't have to be Salomon and Suunto and all of them. Is there any products that you swear by for ultra running?
I swear by the gels, the Spring Energy gels, 100%. Yeah. I found that, so I can't eating solid food is really hard when you're exerting yourself. Like, you just find you don't have the energy to chew anymore. So it needs to be something in gel form. But your standard maltodextrin gels, even if I was eating, you know, 3 or 4 an hour for, you know, 24 hours, I would still get like peaks and troughs in energy levels, because it's just sugar, and you've got insulin spikes and dips. But with the Spring gels, I found I have much more constant energy levels. So yeah, I really swear by them. I mean, all the Salomon stuff is great. Like I use the S-Lab Ultra shoes, and I've worn them for all my races for the last 3 years, and I absolutely love them. Never had any issues. I think they're awesome. Nothing else is springing to mind.
Just going back to nutrition then, is some in the group have asked about what kind of diet you have? Do you have a specific diet for running, or is there anything that you need to include in your diet for racing or for training? How do you build that kind of nutrition?
My day-to-day diet, I guess I don't follow a specific diet. I would say that 95% of what I eat is plant-based, but that's not out of a choice because I think it's going to make me a better runner. That's because for environmental reasons, I guess. I think it's best for my health and best for the planet. I do eat eggs. We've got chickens, so I eat their eggs, but I don't eat any meat, or I rarely have dairy products. But again, it's just a personal choice. I mean, day to day, just a lot of carbs. It's all about carbs. It's all about carbs and drip feeding protein at strategic times, I guess. So yeah, for me, like if I have a long session, people always talk about having like a recovery shake after a long session, right? Which is great, but for me, I don't know, if I have a long session, I will come home and eat a mixing bowl of pasta or rice, or I don't know, that it's all about replenishing your glycogen stores super quickly after long sessions, and then drip feeding protein, because obviously carbs you can store as glycogen in your muscles. Protein you can't store, so for recovery it just needs to be in really small amounts at regular intervals. Yeah, and I don't know, a generally healthy diet, but with a big emphasis on carbs. And around like racing and things, I don't really change anything around racing. I just stick to what I'm not that fussy, to be honest. It's not like I have to eat a plate of pasta the night before a race. I might have a pizza or anything really.
So you being at the level you're at, your glycogen stores are constantly being topped up all the time, and you're not, the whole thing about carb loading is when you're running 7 days a week, or at least 6 or 7 days a week, your body's so used to packing that glycogen away into it, that just carb loading the night before a race isn't really going to make any difference anyway, is it? So
I mean, if you've got a race that you've tapered for, your glycogen stores are going to be gradually being topped up in a few days or week beforehand. So you don't need to carbo load in the last 24 hours, and that would usually just lead to stomach problems.
How do you, speaking of tapers, how do you cope with tapers? Are you somebody who starts to go mad by the second week of reducing your mileage, or are you fine with it? Do you accept it and get on with it and enjoy it?
Yeah, I don't enjoy it, no. I mean, if I'm enjoying the taper, it means it's probably not working and I've probably done too much.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So if you're like, oh, now I get to rest and enjoy that whole time, then yeah, you're probably too tired going into a race. So yeah, I hate it, but I know if I'm hating it, that's a good sign. That makes sense.
It means you haven't completely burnt yourself out, and your body's ready for the rest. Yeah, good point. I'm just going to go through my list of questions. Excuse the silence. Yeah, I think we've been through everything, apart from my last question, which is, are you a drinker? Beer or wine, alcohol? What's your take on pre-race, post-race? Do you drink in the week? Have you got a favourite? Sam sat here drinking a hobgoblin.
No, I haven't got anything. Yeah, I drink. I don't drink regularly. It's more like when I feel like it. If I really wanted a beer, I'd have a beer. If I wanted a glass of wine, I'd have a glass of wine. So I would say, on average, well, over the Christmas period, I probably had a lot more than I'm drinking now. But yeah, like I like pale ale. Yeah, and I like red wine. I drink white wine as well. I don't avoid anything, I wouldn't say. I've got some rhubarb gin at the moment, which is going down very well.
We were talking about rhubarb gin before we started the chat. Actually,
Really?
Sarah was saying she'd got a bottle of rhubarb gin, and I said, was it the Aldi rhubarb gin? And she said no, it was a proper bottle of gin rather than the Aldi version, which we drink at our house. But it's cheap and it's nice. It's okay.
Yeah.
So you're not a strict no drinker then? Because some athletes just completely just say that they're not interested in alcohol at all because it's something that sort of distracts them from the training or racing. You're able to keep it in moderation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the people that have to completely avoid it are the people that they can't just have one beer, and they know if they have one beer that'll turn into like 5 beers. But for me, like, I'll never want more than 1 or 2 drinks, and there's no like, if you're only ever going to want 1 drink, then there's no detriment to that. Like, maybe not the night before the race or the night before a hard session, but yeah, I think in moderation it's fine, no problem at all. Yeah.
Brilliant. If we've just got a couple of minutes left, is there anyone in the group that's got any questions that we've missed? I can see through participants, I can see whether you put your hand up or not. If you've got anything that you wanted to ask, I think you'll just appear at the top of my list. I think Phil had a question. Oh, Kelly.
Sorry, Phil. I can't see how to put my hand up. Do you know what your VO2 is?
No idea.
Ah, interesting.
And it won't mean anything to me. And I know that it depends what distance you're kind of racing. So, but if you're racing 100 miles, there's going to be so little correlation between like your VO2 max and how well you do in a race. I mean, in a way, it would be nice to know out of curiosity. It wouldn't change anything I did, I guess.
No, I'm just curious. Yeah, no, I get it. That's fine. Yeah, I just wonder if your coach needed to know. And so, do you do anything on heart rate or power? Do you use Stride?
No, nothing. I do it all on RPE. So yeah, nothing on heart rate. All on feel. Yeah.
I just need to cheat. I just need to use all the tech I can because I'm not a natural runner, but I'm a geek, so I use it to my advantage. So yeah, thanks for answering. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I know, a lot of amazing athletes who use heart rate all the time and swear by it, and then a lot of who don't pay any attention to it at all. So yeah, it's just what I've done for a while now, and it feels right. So I'm not going to change anything, I guess.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Right.
Thanks, Phil. Kelly, you had your hand up first. Kelly Ross, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I just wondered if you'd got, because I know you've done absolutely loads of amazing races and gone to loads of amazing places. I just wondered if there was anything still left on your hit list that you've got a bit burning desire to do.
Yeah, the main one is Hard Rock. I would love to do the Hard Rock 100. Although the getting into it is hard. In similar to Western States, it's very difficult to get a place, and there are fewer routes for elite athletes. But yeah, that's certainly, it's in the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. So yeah, I'd love to do that. That's the main one. But actually, at the moment, I guess what's more important to me is doing races that it's all about the competition, I guess, rather than going to different places and things. It's more about the competition. So the races I get most excited about are the ones that have like the really stacked field, I guess, where you're going to have a really, really good race.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you.
So just following on from that question, what would be your kind of career defining win? What race would it be that you would think you could happily retire after winning?
I don't think I would happily retire after winning.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of self-perpetuating. It would be a really tough call between Western States and UTMB. But yeah, one of those races, that's like my goal in running at the moment, and has been and probably will be for a few years. Yeah.
Two very difficult, very competitive races. Yeah. Which do you think is, having done both, which is harder?
Well, UTMB is definitely harder, as in to complete it or to win it.
Just in general, yeah. Yeah,
UTMB is harder for sure. It's got more climb, higher altitude. Yeah, it's harder for sure. Not necessarily harder to win. I'm not sure. They're about on par with each other.
Because a lot of American ultra runners come over to Europe and struggle, don't they, with the terrain. I think we're being in Europe, we're kind of used to the short and sharp, steep climbs, whereas in the States, the trails are a bit different over there, aren't they? How do you find that racing? What they would call a trail race over there, and then what we call a trail race in Europe, the big differences between those.
I mean, in general, the trails are kind of smoother and more runnable in the US, but there are still plenty of rough trails in the US. But equally, the Europeans go over to the US and struggle to do well in their trail races. Like, there haven't been many Europeans who've done well at Western States, for example. So yeah, I don't know exactly what it is. A few factors, I think.
Yes, it's slightly different culture, isn't it? We are slightly different. Okay, lovely. Right, well, I'm all questioned out. I'm sure you're probably all answered out. There's no more questions from the group. So I just want to, on behalf of the club, thank you for your time, and we really appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. And if for those that are new to ultra running in the group or want to try it, have you got any final words of advice for especially since it's International Women's Day? Is there any advice you can give to our club members that are thinking of trying ultra running this year?
Yeah, I mean, just give it a go. I think most people underestimate what they're capable of in the short term and the long term. And yeah, you only learn by giving it a go, and everyone makes mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. You just have to get stuck in and see what you can do. And the most satisfying, I think for me, the most satisfying period of my career was those early days when you were just making mistakes and learning and getting better so quickly. And I think that's inevitable when you start out doing ultras. So it's really, really exciting time.
Brilliant. Appreciate your advice. And for all those watching tonight, just get out and try it, give it a go, and take Beth's advice and get a coach. I'm available if you need a coach. Little personal ad there. Thank you, Beth. We really appreciate you spending some time with us and answering all those questions. And we look forward to seeing your success at the races coming up this year. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thanks for
No
having
problem.
us.
We'll see you soon. Thanks.
Bye.
See you.